university, a silence so heavy it felt alive filled the lecture hall. "Perhaps you should consider an easier subject, Miss Lawrence," said Professor Hammond, his tone dripping with superiority. "Not everyone has the mindset for advanced biochemistry." 200 pairs of eyes turned toward Naomi Lawrence, the only student who seemed calm, though a spark of anger burned deep within her. It wasn't the first time the professor had mocked her, but this time he went too far. His words weren't just about her answer, they were about her right to belong in that room. A few nervous laughs rippled through the class. Some students stared at their notebooks, pretending not to notice. No one spoke up. "Answer the question, Miss Lawrence," Hammond pushed, adjusting his glasses with theatrical precision. "Or will you admit you're out of your depth?" Naomi took a slow breath. At 22, she was used to being underestimated. The daughter of a cleaner and a bus driver, she had reached this elite university through pure determination and scholarships earned by brilliance alone. No one knew what kind of mind hid behind those steady eyes. "The Cas9 enzyme," she began calmly, "acts like molecular scissors through a two-step biochemical mechanism. First, it identifies target DNA using a guide RNA. Then it makes a precise break in the double strand, allowing genetic editing." The professor frowned. The answer was correct, too correct. He wanted more. "Elementary, Lawrence," he sneered. "Any first year could say that. Explain the ethical issues discussed in the Wong et al. Paper on human embryo editing. Nature Biotechnology, Volume 87, page 834, if I recall correctly." It was a trap. That article wasn't required reading, only mentioned once in passing months ago. Naomi looked straight at him. The room froze. Everyone expected her to fail. "The study by Wong and colleagues," she said clearly, "raises three major ethical concerns. First, the issue of consent. Embryos can't agree to permanent genetic changes. Second, it highlights inequality of access, warning that genetic enhancements could deepen social divides. And third, as noted on page 837, it sets a precedent for non-therapeutic modifications that could reshape human evolution." A hush fell over the room. Professor Hammond blinked, his arrogance faltering. "Correct," he muttered, tugging at his collar. "Though I doubt you grasp the deeper nuances." Naomi continued, undisturbed. "Actually, the conclusion calls for balance between innovation and caution through open global dialogue. It even cites Garcia and Patel's studies, which argue that delaying gene therapy also carries ethical costs, measured in human lives." Gasps echoed. She had quoted every line perfectly, from an article most hadn't even seen. Hammond's face flushed crimson. How could she possibly know that? What no one in that room realized was that Naomi Lawrence wasn't an ordinary student. She possessed a rare, razor-sharp mind, one that remembered everything she read, word for word. And that day, the professor who tried to humiliate her learned an unforgettable lesson of his own. If you enjoyed this story of justice and inner strength, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because Naomi's story is far from over. "You seem to have memorized a few papers," Professor Hammond said with a cold smile. "A useful party trick, though not a substitute for genuine understanding. Let's test your ability to think, something no amount of memorization can fake." Naomi caught the tone behind his words. He didn't see her as a thinker, just a machine that could repeat information. From a nearby desk, a whisper reached her. "He's not going to stop until he embarrasses you." Hammond straightened his jacket and spoke loudly, abandoning the lesson entirely. "Imagine a small, isolated community suffering from a rare genetic illness. The only possible cure involves testing on their own children. The community lacks the knowledge to fully grasp the risks. As a researcher, would you proceed? Justify your answer using Harrington's model of scientific responsibility. It was a trap, an impossibly complex question with no perfect answer. Whatever Naomi said, he twisted against her. At the back of the room, Dr. Eliza Chun, a professor of medical ethics visiting as an observer, frowned. The hostility in Hammond's tone was obvious. Naomi inhaled slowly. "Professor, that question presents a false choice," she began calmly. "Harrington's 2019 paper emphasizes that such cases must be viewed through a spectrum of solutions, Not just yes or no. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. According to Harrington's three-tiered protocol, the ethical path begins with education and capacity building within the community, followed by the creation of a local council with decision-making power, and finally a gradual rollout under constant monitoring, with every participant retaining the right to withdraw. Hammond's jaw tightened. "You're oversimplifying a complex dilemma," Naomi interrupted gently. Page 47 of Harrington's article states, "The greatest ethical failure is assuming vulnerable groups cannot understand complexity when given proper tools and time." A murmur filled the room. Students began whispering, some typing frantically on their laptops. Dr. Chun leaned forward, intrigued. Hammond's patience snapped. He slammed his palm on the desk. "This isn't a book club, Miss Lawrence. This is serious science." Naomi didn't flinch. "Exactly, Professor, which is why I referenced the accepted ethical framework used by leading institutions to address precisely this scenario." The color drained from his face. "Class dismissed," he barked. "I expect an essay next week on the moral boundaries of bioscience. Miss Lawrence, stay behind." The students packed up quickly, exchanging uneasy looks. One of them, a curly-haired girl named Zoe, whispered, "He's furious. I've never seen him end a class early." "I'll be fine," Naomi said softly, organizing her notes. Zoe hesitated. "We're going to Cafe Artemis after this. You should come. We need to talk about what just happened." Naomi nodded, surprised by the kindness. As Zoe left, Naomi noticed Dr. Chun approaching Hammond, her expression tight and serious. When the last student exited, Hammond shut the door with unnecessary force. "I don't know what you're trying to pull, Miss Lawrence," he said in a low, sharp voice. "But let's be very clear. I've spent 30 years building my reputation here. I have former students at the top of the field. I won't allow a transfer student with a photographic memory to undermine my authority in my own classroom." Naomi stood tall. "It's not a trick, Professor. It's simply how my brain works." "I know exactly how it works," he snapped. "You memorize articles to impress. But let me teach you how the academic world truly functions. Students like you may get through the door because of policy, but true success, that's earned." The insult hung in the air, cold and heavy. Naomi felt it cut deep, but she refused to show it. "My final grade depends entirely on your evaluation, doesn't it, Professor?" she asked evenly. A slow, cruel smile crossed his face. "Exactly. And believe me, I have many ways to ensure every student ends up where they belong. Think about that before our next meeting." When Naomi stepped out of the building 20 minutes later, the sky had already begun to darken. Her phone buzzed. A message from Zoe with the cafe address. As she crossed the quiet campus, her extraordinary mind was already working. Every word Hammond had said in that classroom, every threat, every movement, all of it was perfectly stored in her memory. What Hammond didn't realize was that by cornering her, he'd handed her the most powerful weapon of all, knowledge. At Cafe Artemis, a small group of students was waiting. Among them was Ryan, a journalism intern with a discreet audio recorder from the university newspaper. They had no idea that what was about to begin wouldn't just be a student-teacher dispute. It would become a turning point for the entire university, because Naomi wasn't planning to fight for a grade anymore. She was about to expose the truth. Over the next week, she studied obsessively, not just biochemistry, but Hammond himself. Every article he had ever written, every interview, every paper he'd supervised. Her photographic memory cataloged every contradiction and every inconsistency across his 30-year career. At the cafe, the alliance took shape. Zoe, the curly-haired student, turned out to be the editor-in-chief of the campus paper. Ryan was her assistant, and Dr. Eliza Chun, the ethics professor who had witnessed the confrontation, quietly offered her support. "Are you sure about this?" Zoe asked as they finalized their plan. "Hammond has influence. He could end your academic future." Naomi smiled faintly. "He already tried. He made it clear I'd fail no matter how perfect my work was. So now, I have nothing to lose." A week later, the university amphitheater was overflowing. News of Dr. Hammond's open master class had spread across campus, a rare chance to hear one of the school's most celebrated professors. On stage, Hammond adjusted his microphone, clearly enjoying the attention. In the front row sat Naomi, calm and composed. Today, Hammond began smoothly, we'll discuss the ethical boundaries of modern bioscience. I'll begin with my own concept, the Hammond principle of ethical proportionality. That's when Naomi raised her hand. He hesitated. Ignoring her in front of hundreds of people would have looked suspicious. Yes, Miss Lawrence, he said, his tone edged with irritation. Professor, Naomi said clearly, before you continue, could you clarify how this principle aligns with the opposite position you defended in the Journal of Bioethics back in 2018? A ripple of confusion spread through the audience. Hammond blinked. I'm not sure what you mean. My work has been entirely consistent. Naomi continued, unshaken. In your article, Ethical Frontiers in Genetic Research, page 142, paragraph 3, you wrote that cultural and socioeconomic considerations are secondary to scientific advancement. That seems completely opposed to the proportionality model you're presenting today. The room fell silent, then erupted in murmurs. You're twisting my words, Hammond snapped. You're taking them out of context. I can quote the entire context if you prefer, Naomi said evenly, just as I can cite 7 other papers where you contradict your own ethical positions when it benefits your sponsors. Gasps filled the room. Students turned to one another, whispering. At the back, Dr. Chun folded her arms, watching closely. Dean Blackwell, who had just entered, frowned. Professor Hammond, this is highly irregular, the dean said quietly. Hammond slammed his palm on the lectern. This is a lecture, not a debate. I agree, Naomi replied, standing slowly. A lecture should present honest, consistent ideas, not convenient contradictions adjusted to whoever funds the research. From her bag, she pulled a slim folder. Inside this are 15 years of your published inconsistencies, including, she paused deliberately, documented examples of biased grading towards students you deemed unsuitable. The audience froze. Phones came out. Cameras started recording. For the first time in his career, Dr. Hammond was speechless. The auditorium went silent. So silent, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Dr. Hammond's face burned with fury. How dare you, he began, but stopped abruptly as the side doors opened. 3 members of the university's ethics committee entered, led by Dean Blackwell. It wasn't a coincidence. 3 days earlier, Naomi had sent them a carefully documented report, complete with references, timelines, and evidence. Dr. Hammond, the dean's deep voice echoed through the hall. I believe we need to talk. Hammond froze, looking around like a trapped animal. Then his eyes locked on Naomi. You, he hissed into the still live microphone. You don't know who you're dealing with. Naomi stepped forward, her voice calm and unshaken. On the contrary, Professor, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. You once told me you had many subtle ways to make problem students find their true level. She glanced at Ryan, who lifted a small audio recorder for everyone to see. Fortunately, Naomi continued, I know a few ways myself. The color drained from Hammond's face. He recognized his own recorded words. From the back row, someone began to clap, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding the student he had tried to humiliate. What began as an act of public shaming had turned into something else entirely. A moment of poetic justice, powered by the extraordinary mind that Hammond had underestimated. As Dean Blackwell led the shaken professor off stage, Naomi stood still, composed. She knew the coming storm would be fierce. She hadn't just stood up to a professor. She had challenged an entire system that had allowed this behavior to go unchecked for years. The question now was, would the university choose justice or protect its own? 3 weeks later, the Westridge University campus was still buzzing about what everyone was calling the Hammond affair. The ethics committee had completed its investigation, and the outcome shook the academic world. As Naomi walked down the corridor of the science building, she felt the change. Students who once ignored her now greeted her with quiet respect. Professors who had previously looked through her now stopped to say hello. Zoe came running toward her, waving the latest issue of the campus newspaper. It's out! Front page! She said breathlessly. The headline was bold. Renowned professor removed after years of systematic discrimination. The article detailed how Naomi's evidence had exposed a pattern of bias in Hammond's grading, particularly against underrepresented students. The dean ordered a full review of his grading from the last 5 years, Zoe explained as they walked toward the administration building. And dozens of former students are coming forward with similar stories. The university had made an unprecedented move. Hammond was not only suspended immediately, he was stripped of his mentorship privileges. His once prestigious office was being cleared out that very day. Inside the dean's office, Naomi found Dean Blackwell, 3 members of the university council, and to her surprise, Dr. Chun. Miss Lawrence, the dean began gravely, on behalf of Westridge University, I want to apologize for the treatment you endured. He slid an envelope across the table. We are offering you a full scholarship for the remainder of your degree and a guaranteed place in our doctoral program should you choose to continue here. Dr. Chun smiled warmly. And I'd like to personally invite you to join my research group. Your work revealed not only a remarkable memory, but an exceptional analytical mind. Naomi accepted the documents calmly, though a swirl of emotions filled her chest. Victory felt good, but bittersweet. How many others had suffered in silence before her? Thank you, she said quietly. But my biggest concern is for the students who came before me, the ones whose careers were quietly destroyed by prejudice disguised as academic evaluation. The dean nodded solemnly. A review committee is being formed to re-examine past cases, and we're introducing a blind evaluation system to ensure fairness going forward. It was Naomi's idea, Dr. Chun added with a proud smile. When Naomi stepped outside, Ryan and a group of students were waiting, faces of every background and story. Some smiled. Some had tears in their eyes. You've started a silent revolution, said a third-year student softly. Naomi looked around, at the campus bathed in afternoon light, at the students who finally felt seen. And for the first time she realized, she hadn't just won a battle. She had changed the rules of the game. Hammond once told me, Naomi said quietly, that I didn't have the right kind of mind for advanced research. She smiled faintly. Now I finally understand what he was really saying. And where is Hammond now? Ryan asked, sipping his coffee. Naomi shrugged. Ryan grinned. Word is, he's packing up his office in record time. 3 universities already withdrew their visiting offers after today's headlines. Inside the crowded Café Artemis, the atmosphere was electric. Zoe climbed onto a chair, clapping her hands for attention. To Naomi Lawrence, she said, raising her glass, who proved that knowledge isn't just power, it's justice. The cafe erupted in applause. Naomi, usually reserved, felt warmth flood her cheeks. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't the quiet girl in the back row. She was seen, truly seen, not only for her extraordinary mind, but for her courage to stand up when no one else dared. 3 months later, at a national bioethics conference, Naomi finished presenting her paper on systemic bias in medical research. As the crowd dispersed, a familiar figure approached. It was Hammond. His once confident posture was gone, replaced by a tired humility. You destroyed my career, he said quietly. Naomi met his eyes, calm and unflinching. No, Professor. You destroyed it the moment you decided that some students deserved less, not because of their intellect, but because of your own prejudice. He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again, defeated by the weight of the truth. Your own words condemned you, Naomi continued softly. I just remembered them and had the courage to repeat them. Hammond turned and walked away, shoulders heavy. And in that moment, Naomi understood something profound. Her photographic memory was a gift, but it wasn't her real power. Her true strength was moral courage, the will to stand against injustice, even when it came from someone powerful. Naomi Lawrence's story soon spread far beyond Westridge. Students across the country began questioning systems that had gone unchallenged for decades. She had shown that one voice, speaking the truth with conviction, can transform an entire institution. Because the greatest power isn't in memorizing facts or collecting degrees. It's in having the courage to challenge what's wrong when everyone else stays silent. As Naomi learned, knowledge without courage is just information, but knowledge with purpose that becomes a force capable of changing the world. If this story inspired you, Leave a comment about a time someone was underestimated but proved their worth. Subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, truth, and justice. Because every story shared brings us one step closer to a world where people like Naomi no longer have to prove they belong. They're already enough.